Okay, it is exactly 8:30. It is Monday, November the 25th, and welcome to week 4. Week 4 already of drugs and crime. And we're going to spend the next few few minutes uh, going over the materials for this week. We're going to talk about the topics for the week. And I did send you the PowerPoints, and I also sent you some articles and information. I sent you something concerning Senate Bill 3023, which I'll be talking about a little bit tonight, and it involves the way law enforcement is operating as far as drugs concerned. So let's get right into the module. I'm sharing my screen. Okay, you can see the instructor information, all that stuff that you're already familiar with. You know that the rubrics are in each week's module, and we're going to go over that. And then you'll see here, if you look at this, we have 2 more lectures after today. And when those 2 lectures are coming up, one next week, in fact, that'll be the first one in December. So we have 2 in December, and the course ends in December, but you'll see that in the calendar. And then you see the recordings for week 1, 2, and 3. Today you'll see week 4 down here, as well as I'm emailing them to you. And so here's the issues that we have for week 4: drug-related criminal activity, the law enforcement perspective, and we're going to deal, you had chapters 6 and 7 of the textbook, and then combating drug trafficking organizations and law enforcement response to the heroin epidemic. And we're going to deal with those issues this week. And then we're going to just a little bit about forfeiture. Your discussion assignment is forfeiture. Your initial post is due tomorrow night, and then your reply posts are due Saturday night, 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time. And then your written course project, heroin and opioid law enforcement perspective, and then you have the quiz. I will be providing for you in the next day or two your week 2 assignments that I will be have ready. I was going to have them ready this weekend, but I had some emergencies I ran into this weekend, so I didn't get a chance to finish them. I did start on them, but they will be done in the next day or so. And then complete the mid-quarter student survey and provide that to me as well. Then you know what my motto is all about. So now let's look at the course calendar real quick. And you can see where we are here. Go down here. This is where we are today. Again, your reading assignment, if you click on it, it tells you that. And then you click on all of these. It tells you the topic for each. So your discussion post, 26th, and your reply post, the 30th. And then your course project written assignment is due the 1st of December, which is this Sunday coming up. And then your quiz will be coming up as well. I do recommend, as I've said before, to take the quiz after you've gone through the module so that you can maximize your points. Okay, and then you see, then next week will be week 5. And then if you go and look at the December calendar, which you'll see will be in week 5 in December, then the following week is it. The 13th is the last day of class. So you can see this class is very, 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 very fast. All 5.5 classes are going that way. Those of you who are in this class that have taken Introduction to Corrections, the 11-week course, I will be teaching that in the winter quarter, but it is going now to 5.5 weeks. It's a whole different course. I'm reviewing it now as I speak, and I just threw that out because many of you have been in that class before, and I know many of you from having been in that course. And I'm actually glad that it's changing. There's some new stuff that's involved. They did a little something with the course project that all you guys are familiar with from that 115 Introduction to Corrections. So anyway, that's the calendar, and you see that there's a final exam that takes place on the 13th as well. And I've already said that it's going to be comprehensive. I said from the beginning, make sure that you keep your PowerPoints so that you can use them to help you to deal with getting these exams. They are timed, as you already know. All right. So now let's go to week 4. Again, reminding you, you have a very valuable tool, that this course guide, which gives every week the assignment tab, so it tells you about Module 4, and then you'll see 5 and 6 each week. And I encourage students to utilize that in terms of preparing your assignments. So now the course project is dealing with heroin and opioids, the law enforcement perspective. And it tells you exactly what you're going to do. You're going to conduct research to learn more about how law enforcement efforts are dealing with preventing drug trafficking and drug-related activities, and then also about law enforcement responses to heroin epidemic. I'm going to be talking about that tonight, dealing with some of the things that has taken place. Tells you a minimum of 3 pages, which you should be familiar with, 3 credible resources, not your textbook. And then it tells you to deal with these particular issues. You go to the rubric, which you click on here, you'll see it again, and it tells you the due date, and then it breaks it down by section, and it tells you the same thing in this section that I just got through talking about, at least 3 credible resources, not your text. 3 pages, double spaced, people, not single space. 3 pages means check your grammar and your spelling, and make sure you run your papers through Grammarly. Then cover page, you know, APA formatted, which we've been talking about since day 1. You should be well aware of what that involves. And then the only other thing, other than your discussion assignment, which we know what you have to do in terms of that, some of you have already started, is getting ready for the quiz. 30-minute quiz, and it's the same number of questions as the other quizzes. So you know how many to expect. You know how you're supposed to take these tests without any notes, books, or anything. It's a closed book exam. And then your live keyword is also due on Sunday. And then your survey, if you can just take time to do that, it helps us as instructors as well. Okay, so that's your assignments for this week. So now let's get into the lesson content itself. So we're going to deal with how law enforcement deals with these drug issues, and then we're going to deal with some of the challenges that law enforcement face. Next week, we're going to deal with it a little differently, but we're going to start out talking about law enforcement. But so next week is going to actually tie in with this week. So we're going to start out by drug trafficking organizations, discussing that. And then we're going to conclude by dealing with what law enforcement is doing with the heroin epidemic, what their response is. As you have been given some articles to help you with your research as well that I provided. So you got a head start there on what I sent you. So you make sure that you check the PowerPoint along with the articles and also with the Senate Bill 3023 that I said. I'm pretty sure I did. Let me double check it. I think I did. Let me go back and make sure. And let's see, I can see what I sent. There it is. The PowerPoints for week 4. Yep, here it goes. These are the PowerPoints 6 and 7. And then these are the 2 articles. And then Senate Bill 3023, which you're going to discuss it today. And then we're going to discuss it next week as well. All right, so let's get back to here. Let's get to the lesson content. So we already went over these things here. So let's talk about what's happening here. As you and I both know, probably before you take this class, that drugs are generally not from this country. They're from other countries. Mexico and China, as it says, are some of the major places. There are other, Turkey as well, that provides the drugs. Latin America. There's also drugs that come down through the Bahamas and Jamaica and places like that. But these are the primary suppliers, those that come out of Mexico and China. And so these, what they call DTOs, or drug trafficking organizations, they provide the drugs, opium and heroin, and some of these other drugs like caffeine, to adding the heroin and fentanyl, and it's sold on the streets. And these synthetic drugs that we've already kind of talked about, things that are used even in animals, people put it in their bodies. And when you put that kind of stuff in your body, do not be surprised when the response is, how should I say, to act kind of wild and out of control. These are things that are not intended to be ingested in the healthy human being. And so even the drugs themselves, like heroin, they talk about the purity of them because of what they use to cut it with and all of the stuff. It's not, as they say, pure heroin. And actually, if it was, some of the levels that people take would instantly result in overdose. And so we have Mexican cartels. You guys should be familiar with the name Joaquin El Chapo. We call him El Chapo. I don't remember his name is Joaquin. I can't think of his last name. But anyway, El Chapo, as you probably know, has been incarcerated, and he has escaped from prison before, but he's still in prison now. But his sons and his family members continue. And you should be aware of the fact that when one of the kingpins is taken out, there are other people in line to be able to continue with these drugs. And so when we're talking about this drug trafficking organization combat, this is kind of like how the war on drugs is operating that we've talked about before, and recognizing the fact that there are so many places that drugs are coming in. You should be aware of the fact that there is some thought that building a wall in Mexico will stop drug trafficking. That is not the case. because most drug trafficking comes through the actual checkpoints, and they come in because they're in mules, which mean people, carry them on their bodies. They also put them in fake engine blocks. They put it in all kinds of places in vehicles, in the seats, the cushions, and even some of the material of the cars is made out of the drugs, and then they get here, and then they get a vehicle here, and then they break it down, and they're turned into drugs. But these cartels, these organizations are very organized. They're as organized as many corporations that you and I are aware of that are legitimate and legal. And what they do is there's constant battle for power and authority with these organizations. And so it talks about here the major cartels consist of Sinaloa Cartel, the Jalisco New Organization, the Juarez Cartel, the Gulf Cartel, Los Zetas Cartel, La Familia, and Beltran, and it goes on. And so there's so much battle for turf to sell these drugs and distribute these drugs into the community. And so who steps up to try to deal with that is the DEA, or the Drug Enforcement Administration. And they have people stationed all over the world. They're in countries like Mexico, they're in Chile, they're in China, they're in Jamaica. They're all over the place. And the goal of these agents is to try to create havoc within the DTO, the drug trafficking organizations. And again, watching who's coming across the border and those situations. So these officers also work together with local authorities, the Border Patrol or ICE. They also work with them, believe it or not. They work with organizations such as the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms and Explosive, and they to fight against these various drug organizations. There are opportunities where law enforcement people go undercover and participate in what we call fake drug buys, and they set up stings also, and they're all over. They're all over the place. And so the idea is, as we scroll down here, is to see that also we now have an agency that was created after September the 11th, 2001, the DHS, which is called the Department of Homeland Security, and work to deal with the borders and deal with the narcotics from Mexico, and because quite a bit of it does, because that's where El Chapo came from, Mexico. And believe it or not, it's really a difficult thing, because there are so many people who accept money illegally to be able to cover up. The other thing that you should be aware of is that these drug cartels operate on the basis of fear for many individuals who pass their drugs out, and what they will do is they will require them to do something to get the drugs into this country under duress, letting them know that if they don't carry out what their cartel tells them to do, then they will kill the family members that are in Mexico. And the law enforcement officials in Mexico, those that are operating legitimately and are not how should I say, crooked, or taking money from the cartels, and therefore they protect the cartels and actually operate as a branch of the DTOs. And so it is a problematic issue. And so what happens is that the feds, the United States, work hard with not just the federal level, but they work with the state police. They operate with the various state authorities, there are county authorities, and then there's local municipal enforcement agencies that work in conjunction with the feds to try to curtail this. But how many of you know, as I've already gone on record and said, that they're losing this because it's kind of like, how should I put it? It's kind of like trying to kill earthworms. You know what happens to earthworms? They go underground, right? And they stay underground. What brings them out generally is if it rains and it gets a lot of water, then they'll come to the surface, but then they'll go back in, and they're underground operating and growing. And that's what happens with drug cartels. And you can see, if you look at the map, it shows the different areas that how DEA is operating. And then, you know, you can take time to look at it. I don't spend a lot of time talking about that. But here's the point. The point that you need to be aware of is, and by the way, this article right here is excellent. It is really, really, really good. Take time to look at it, and you'll deal with the deadly synthetic opioid that is out here, that's manufactured, that is killing people all over the place. So the agencies that I've mentioned previously, they have their hands full. And it's like trying to catch a fish in your hand. I mean, it's not easy. And be aware that when you take out one of the heads, like El Chapo, there are others right behind who are ready to operate. So it's like they have, if you take the head of the organization out, then there's generals behind. And usually those generals are close confidants of the individual that's incarcerated. And also you should be aware of one other thing. When an individual is incarcerated, they have their ways of communicating with the outside world and the people that they want to keep their organization strong. So the law enforcement agencies lack the sophistication of shutting these people down. You hear big drug busts. Oh man, you hear big bust, and it might put a dent in for a while, but they come back in another direction, in another way. And so the key thing is that they just keep hammering at it and keep hammering at it. It's just like cleaning up a place, then leaving, and then coming back the next day, and it's completely dirty again. That's pretty much what happens there. So it's problematic. It is problematic. And I already said that the thing that's going to really help is when people are not buying it, or when there's a dent put into the need of people for these drugs, or either, to put it the same way, you have some businesses that go under, is when there's no more market for that, then they disappear or they go out of business. But trust me, they make sure that they create their own market by how they allow people to terrorize, as well as to offer people big money. There's a whole lot of cash involved in drugs, a lot of cash. Not checks, not really credit cards, but this cash involved. So that's what I wanted to share with you about the aspect about what law enforcement is doing. Now I want to turn to and talk about what law enforcement is doing with the heroin epidemic. And there are, as we already know, it's called an epidemic because of the fact that, and you know what's really interesting about the thing, it's called epidemic because it's not just hitting urban areas, it's now hitting um, um, wealthy areas where people live in big homes, and upper income people, educated people as well. And so what has happened is that with this heroin issue that you guys are dealing with your projects here, there's been a serious increase of overdoses of heroin, and then this heroin again, or opioid, is definitely like a how to say, there are other additives put into them, like fentanyl, which is a synthetic pill manufactured. When you say synthetic, then you know it's being manufactured. Opioid pain medication in other cases, and then what happens is individuals start to innocently deal with pain pills, and you're going to see that in some videos that will be coming up pretty soon. Actually, you're going to see a video in a few minutes that I'm going to share with you. That's a shorter one. But so as a result of that, heroin addicts inject the lace heroin without concern. They don't know whether it's pure or not. They just get it, and they put it in their bodies, and oftentimes they find themselves in situations where they're near death. And so what has happened is law enforcement has come up with some medical ways and first responders to deal with this, such as Narcan, which is a Noxolone. It's a brand name for Noxolone. And then what it is an antidote to opioid ODs. And what opioids do is they slow your breathing, attack your heart, and what Noxolone does is it's an antibody, and it blocks the effects of the opioid and reverse the whole symptoms. And it works, and it's very expensive, but almost all departments now, first responders as well as law enforcement, carry this Noxolone around. They have it in pill form. They have it in a form that you can inject, and then they have a form that you can put in the nasal. And so they deal with overdoses of heroin and oxycodone, hydrocodone, and morphine. And Narcan is, as it says here, a controlled substance, and it has to be trained. Someone has to be trained, and it talks about the fact that first responders have these. But as I said again, the problem with these is this: is that there are problems when you can't stop how a person is. A few years ago, a couple years ago, I met a man by the name of Tim Ryan, and I'm holding up the book right here that I have here, and I've shared this with other classes, From Dope to Hope. And this man was a recovering addict, and in fact, now he is a counselor. And in his book, he talks about some of the problems that it and the effects that it has on families. And I recommend you get this book. I've been talking to the school about trying to get it in the library. I don't even know if it's on a digital, but this guy is from here in Illinois. And so the type of the book is From Dope to Hope, A Man in Recovery. And Tim gave me this book at the Rasmussen College campus in Romeoville. And this man actually shares that one of the heartaches that he had is that he couldn't even save his own son from this. But he talks about these drugs and how they affect people. So now let's look at here. The FDA as I was telling you earlier, now has a nasal application for naloxone, and it makes it easier. And the nasal injection is easier as for first responders with minimal training. So you can click on this link under here, and you can read more about that. So right now, what I want to do is take a few minutes to share with you a movie. So you can check these links. I want to share this video with you called Chasing the Dragon, and you'll see a little bit about this. I'm going to take my headset. I'm going to take my video and stop it so that you won't be distracted. So pay attention to this. This is a shortened version. There's a longer version of Chasing the Dragon we're going to do, but listen to this very carefully and pay attention.
Prescription pills and opiates definitely become an increasing problem that we see, and not only involving the crimes that investigate actual drug diversion, but it, involves other things too. People start committing other crimes when they start seeing, the need that they have for this drug. I think the worst part of it is that it's starting at, kids with a very young age. Kids that are, middle school even are starting to find out what these pills are, and they might think it's fun at first. And then, you talk to them a year, 2 years later, and you realize it's a different story. I mean, so, just the degree that people go to get these pills is insane. I mean, I've seen people that drive 7 hours one way every month each way, so that's a 14-hour round trip just to get these pills because, so you need a job. You can't work your job anymore because all you care about is, driving up to get these pills. And, I mean, your life is over because all you can focus on is, how do I get this drug?
We've done search warrants in huge homes, multi-million-dollar houses, fancy cars, and we've done search warrants in houses where there's no food in the refrigerators. I remember one individual subject, I had arrested his mother and his father, and also arrested him. He was injecting OxyContin, as many as 35 a day, intravenously, and he was using creek water just out of a local stream because he was living out in the woods. Everybody thinks they pop a few pills, it's no big deal. You young kids out there, you better just be very, very aware of what's going on with these pills. You can get addicted with one pill, and for the rest of your life, it will absolutely ruin you. It doesn't discriminate against you young or old, or you're black, or you're white, or you're a male, or you're a female. I've arrested from 12 years old to 86 years old. I've arrested grandma and grandpa. I've arrested the young boy that takes pills from his parents' cabinet and takes them to school and gives them to some other kids in school. When somebody gets sick, gets rushed to a hospital, and thank God doesn't die. I've worked probably at least 24 overdose deaths that are 100% related to prescription meds where it's too late, they're already dead.
A lot of students went down the road, a lot of young people go down the road of trying to drug for recreational purposes, and they don't understand the devastation that it has to their own life and the lives of their parents. I should add the victims of the crime include infants. We have had subjects who were pregnant women who gave birth to oxycodone, opiate-addicted babies and infants. They even had to have the baby in jail, and it's a growing problem as well.
Seen a lot of overdoses, a lot of death. Scary thing is it's getting younger and younger. It used to be the heroin overdoses seemed like they were all adults. Lately they've been getting younger and younger, low 20s, even into their high teens. So I've talked to hundreds of heroin addicts or opiate addicts, and they all tell me the same thing. If they could do one thing different, they never would have started in the first place. That's the one regret that they all have is that they started when they were young, and once you're an addict for life, and best way to avoid that is just to never do it.
We're seeing a dramatic shift in how it's affecting the lives of young people. They're experimenting with friends at parties, and they think it's safe to take pills from the medicine cabinet or a friend. And during the 1 week period, we had 9 fatal overdoses in a 3-jurisdiction area. And over the Christmas holiday, I read 2 obituaries of people that I had arrested for prescription fraud and related offenses. Their parents buried them. They were young, 20-some years old.
So you see, this is just a little bit. Let me put my headset back on a minute here. Okay. And then let me get out of this. It's a pretty serious issue, and you should be aware of the fact that it starts as innocent as, and you're going to discover this in next week more in detail, but I'm just giving you a little introduction to it, that people start out on painkillers. And I'm not talking about people who do it for recreational, like some of these people just to get high, like they do with cocaine. But no, what happens is they start out with some innocent painkillers. And my wife will tell you that I am a person who I really don't like to take painkillers because of the fact that I've seen too many people that I know being adversely affected and graduating from painkillers to opioids and actually eventually dealing with heroin. And with the fact that there are so many individuals that are finding themselves in situations where it's happening. So what I'm saying to you is law enforcement has responded to this epidemic. Now, we here in Illinois, and I'm going to give me a minute while I put it up here, because you guys have it already. But I'm gonna matter of fact, I think I got it on my course. I think I got it on my course homepage too. Let me see. If I don't, then I'm just going to bring it up to you. Let me see if I have it down here. I thought I had put it in here. Oh, no. There is something that I do want to share with you before I go to that. One of your classmates, she came up with this. She knows who she is. And I want to share this with you. So I'm going to put this in. I'm going to put this in here. Paste and go. So there's something that you can. Let's see. No, that's not it. That is not it. Let's see. I know this is what she. Let's see if I can open it. Yeah, here we go. You guys should be able to see this. So this is a message that I want to play that actually kind of like explains a little bit of it. This is one of the things that I'm not being political here. I'm just sharing some information, and I want you to pay attention to this. Again, I'm going to take my headset off so you can hear it.
Children will live longer and more prosperous lives than ever before. Tragically, for many of our fellow citizens, the opioid crisis has replaced the American dream with the nightmare of addiction. Terrible, terrible situation. Drug overdoses are now the leading cause of accidental death in the United States. Every day, about 175 Americans die of drug overdose, and the majority of these deaths are caused by opioids. That is why my administration has declared the opioid crisis a national public health emergency. The opioid epidemic is truly the crisis next door. But too often, we forget that. Stigma, silence, and a lack of information prevent us from confronting this crisis as we should. We launched this website to bring together the stories behind the opioid epidemic. These are stories of despair and shock, but also of community, recovery, and hope. I invite every American affected by the opioid crisis to share their story. Working together, we will end the stigma of addiction, defeat the opioid epidemic, and overcome the crisis next door.
Okay, so I want to go back. Whoops, I didn't mean to take it out. I want to go back to it. Let me go back to it. Open the link. Okay, there we go. Okay, now let me put my headphones on. I'm going to say your name. This is a student who's constantly in the lectures. I appreciate her so much, Carol Fields. Thank you for providing this information for us. Let me turn back on my video. Okay. I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you so much. And bringing this to my attention to share with your classmates. And if you take a look at this a little further down, there are so many individuals who have stories, and you could look at these individuals on your own time. And these stories, I sent you guys the links already, and it's posted on the course homepage. And you learn some individuals. One of the individuals that you pointed out, was it Daryl Strawberry? Type in the chat, am I right? Wasn't it Daryl Strawberry? Am I right? She's not saying anything. But yeah, Daryl Strawberry. Some of you don't know who Daryl Strawberry is. Daryl Strawberry was a professional baseball player who played for the New York Mets. And he tells his story of how he overcame this addiction, or dealt with the issue of addiction. And then there's, if you can click on this, and you can load even more stories here. Oh, there we go. There he is right there. And Daryl Strawberry, you get a chance. And then there's some others that you may or may not know the names of. But the truth of the matter is that you should be aware that this is a good resource for you to take a look at. So I'm going to go back here to that. So so anyway, the link is right here on the course homepage, right here, and you can copy and paste it. But I did also send it to each of you so you can look at. Now I want to talk about Senate Bill 3023 a little bit, so that, because there's going to be a long video next week, so I want to go back and give me a minute. Let me pull it up from my course content. It's in my course content. Give me a minute. These are different things that I have here. 3023. Let's go down. It should be in here somewhere. I think it's on the third page. There it is. I want you to take a look at this Senate bill. This is a Senate bill that was passed in the legislative law called the Community Law Enforcement Partnership for Deflection and Substance Use Disorder Treatment. And in this legislation, what has happened is that it gives police, and it says communities, a tool to deal with the opioid crisis. And what it did is gave law enforcement agencies the ability to work with medical individuals and to take individuals who will ordinarily find themselves using these drugs, and what it is in short is it allows them to turn themselves in without being arrested, and it does what we call deflection. And what it does is, as it says here, individuals who have overdosed, who have substance use problems from the criminal justice system and into the addiction treatment services. That's something that I advocate. There's a chief in Eric Gunther, who's the Mundelein police chief in Illinois here, was one of the motivators behind it. But the legislators themselves, you see the state sponsors for for Illinois that did this. And what it did is that it opened up the opportunity for law enforcement to come and deal with it. And I'm going to read what it says. What are deflection programs? And here it is right here, and you can follow along with me. Police officers are on the front line of the opioid crisis. Traditionally, they have two choices when they are faced with someone they believe that has a substance use disorder. They can either arrest a person or not arrest them. Well, what deflection does is that it provides a third option. So the third option is to connect these people with community-based substance use services that address their substance use problems. And that is a step in the direction that I was talking about. Now look at these statistics, and they're in here, and you may not be able to read them clearly, but it says just opioid deaths in Illinois. The number of overdose deaths from all opioids increased, listen to this, it says by 82% in the last 3 years. In the last 3 years. Opioid drug overdoses killed 45% more people than even homicides. Opioid drug overdoses killed 25% more people than motor vehicle crashes. Opioid drug overdoses killed more people than, listen to this, who died, and this is really blow you away, due to all gun-related causes, including homicide, suicide, and accidental shootings. That was like a, whoa, the slap in the face. And then finally, opioid overdoses are an urban, suburban, and rural problem. So it's everywhere. And so this legislation is giving local law enforcement agencies the authority to be able to get these deflection programs. Now, there's no funding that comes directly from it, but there's plenty of funding out here. And then on the back, which you don't have, there are on the back here, which I have here, there are so many organizational entities, such as hospitals, state's attorneys, law enforcement, Illinois Chiefs of Police, Illinois Drug Enforcement Officers, Illinois Sheriff's Association, various departments throughout the state have all bought into this type of thing. And clergy is also involved with this as well. And government, everybody's working together to recognize that there is a problem, and law enforcement is operating with this. So there's a lot that for you to consider and think about in terms of this. So take a look at that, and then you can utilize that in terms of your research papers as well. So I will tell you that dealing with this topic and going back into what we talked about, how this drug trafficking organizational thing, fighting the war, is not really going to help. What's going to help is more of these type things. And next week, I will be providing in week 5 some more organizations throughout the country that have began moving that direction. So you might want to consider the possibility of mentioning in your papers about drug deflection programs throughout the country and the need for them. And so that's what I want to talk about tonight. And I'm going to go back into the classroom. And again, Carol, thank you. Are you there, Carol? Are you there? Type in the chat box. Are you there? Let's see. You there? Yes. Okay. And make it publicly. Make it everyone so everyone can see it. I did thank you. Did you hear me for that information that you provided that was included in this lecture? Did you see that? Oh, you're welcome. No, thank you. Thank you, because that's something that, and I shared with all your classmates. I have a couple of other students who did something like this in another one of my classes, and I appreciate doing that type of thing. Anything to help the education of myself as well as your classmates. And so what I want to do is give you a key phrase. And the key phrase is SB 3023. That's it. You give me that, and you'll get your points for week number 4. So next week, you want to be back. We have a powerful video that we're going to share with you, which also that you have to do it, go through it for your assignment, but the lecture will cover it. And sometimes the lecture goes a little longer, but I want you guys to really dive into these videos, because you get a chance to see in reality. And again, the articles that I shared with you, take a look at those articles. I got those from an Illinois governmental agency that deals with crime. And there's several great articles. I gave you one a few weeks ago, and then I gave you some this week as well. So with that, I'm going to say good night to you guys. I will see you next week at 8:30 Central Standard Time. Have a good week, and happy Thanksgiving to all of you guys. You know, have fun, enjoy. Eat some turkey, whatever else you eat, and just have fun. I know I'm going to be watching my Bears. I don't know how they're going to turn out, but they'll be playing the Lions almost every year. Thank you. Thank you. Happy Thanksgiving to you as well. And good night to you guys, and thank you as well, Gress, Carol and Gress. I appreciate you guys so much. So have a good evening, and I'll see you next Monday when we're in December 2nd for our, that's our final month of lecturing, the 5th, and then not the 5th, the 2nd, and then the 9th. So good night.